Hello, Ayrton.
Hello, Alisa.
This is like third time's a charm. We kept missing each other, but we finally made this happen, and I am
Wow.
so excited.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a challenge for me to talk in English with you today, but it's a real pleasure.
You know, I have had the privilege of interviewing so many people, and I find that God always makes everything understandable.
Yeah.
So I was joking right before we started this that you're one of my top 3 favorite administrative
Oh, thank you
officers.
for your mercy.
It's your top
Thank
3.
you, yes. Don't share the number, please.
So 1, 2. Okay.
Yeah, just 3.
You're in the top 3.
I may be number 3.
I have had the pleasure of being able to get to know you a little bit over the last couple years. One of my favorite memories with you was watching you interact with all of our young summer interns and inspiring them to work for the church. And I recognized there, as you were telling little bits of your story, that there was so much that many of us don't know about you. And as I watched their eyes light up as they started understanding that the church calls people when they are young, I saw this increased interest in them in working for the church, recognizing that it's not just old people, that it's young people, and that they were actually sitting there with a leader who was encouraging them to follow that path. And so I knew that I really wanted to sit down with you and to be able to actually hear that whole life story and not just the little snippets that were shared there. So I know that you are from Brazil.
Yes.
What part of Brazil were you raised in?
I was born in South Brazil. My father was a pastor there, and during that time in an evangelist campaign, I was born. Because at that time, my father was an evangelist director in a local conference. He was sent to a city to plant a new church there, and the entire family moved with him. I had just one brother at that time, and I was born there. I don't have any relatives in that city. I visit that city maybe 2 or 3 times in my life, but I was born there, and I was raised in South Brazil until the time that I went to the boarding school and my life moved forward, but the south part of Brazil.
So I've been to Brazil. It is a beautiful country. I find it intriguing, though, that because your dad was an evangelist, how long was he stationed in this city?
I think that he stayed there for about a year.
Okay. So it's not like I'm speaking from an American mindset here, but in America, we have an evangelist. They come for like 13 weeks at the most. Sometimes it can be 2 weeks. So in my mind, I'm picturing your father, an evangelist, taking his very pregnant wife for like a 1 month
stint. At that
stint.
time, Alisa, the church was not so big in that state. And the evangelist director, he was sent to a city to live there, to start the work, to plant the church, to confirm the members, to prepare the leadership. Today is different in Brazil, here in the United States, and many other places. But at that time, without leadership, without a lot of people to support the church, the evangelist director needed to live in that city for a long time. And it was very positive. That city that is in the mountains of the South Brazil. Right now, I think that they have 5 pastoral districts there, maybe probably 15 churches or more than that. It means the work was very well done. That was a good way, but I recognize that today the church is very dynamic, the church grows a lot, and they do it in a different way.
Actually, I actually love the concept of an evangelist being more of a church planter. I think that often we just kind of come in and we do different things very short term, but being able to have that take root, to be able to grow with the people, help the church grow. To me, that is more of a job of an evangelist. It's not just a hit or miss kind of a thing. Yeah. It's a very beautiful concept, actually.
We have 2 kinds of evangelism. Sometimes the evangelist or someone needs to plant a new church. It means we don't have members there to take care of the new members, to lead the church. It's important to stay for a long time, to deep the roots of people. But sometimes you have some evangelist campaigns in local churches where we have members. It means the evangelist director or someone can come, can preach, can lead some people to be baptized, and that person can leave because the local church can take care of them. But at that time, as I mentioned,
there was no
we have a small
church
or no church in that city, and the evangelist director needed to stay there for a long time, and it was very well done.
What did your mother do?
My mother all the time was taking care of 3 boys.
That's
was a
full-time
huge
job.
task. But during that time, she was not just at home. She was like a teacher of health. in many evangelist campaigns, and after that she was visiting churches and teaching people how to cook vegetarian meals and giving all kinds of orientation. She did it almost all her life. She's 80 something right now. Right now she's not teaching anymore, but she did it for more than 40 years.
So, what I'm hearing is that you were raised in a very evangelistic family,
Yes.
which makes so much sense knowing you and who you are. But that isn't always the case. So, you were raised in this evangelistic home. What would you say are some of the most important foundational things that your parents laid out for you as a young child?
Well, you mentioned that I was raised in an evangelistic home. My father had two different roles in the church. He was a local pastor for some times, but he was evangelist director and administrator of the church. He was a secretary and president in a local field, later in a union, and after that in a local field again, and he finished his ministry in a local church as a local pastor. And I had the opportunity to learn from him how to deal with administrative issues and how to love the mission of the church, both aspects together. I think that I learned from my family, especially from my father, because he was my mentor, my model, the love and the complete dedication for the church, always remembering that we are doing it for the Lord. I remember many times when he did some projects and programs and we asked him, but why you are not traveling by plane? Why you are not sleeping in that kind of hotels? And he said, because we need to save the money of the church. We need to protect the church. We need to do the best for the church. And I learned it from that. The church is in the first place. We are in the second place, always doing our best for the cause. The cause is bigger than us, and always thinking that behind that cause, we have our Lord. We are not working for human leaders. I was a leader sometimes, and the people are not working for me. I'm not working for Pastor Wilson or any other leaders. We are doing the best. We are under the leadership of some people, but we are serving the Lord. It means we need to give our best dedication, our best efforts, our best energies, our best creativity and everything, because we are giving it to the Lord. Talking about the work, the ministry, this legacy was very meaningful for me.
Were there practical ways? I mean, you mentioned the fact that they used money very wisely.
Yeah.
They were good stewards of the money. Were there other practical ways that you think that your parents showed you that mission is the heart of who you are?
You know, one aspect that's not totally related to mission, but it impacted the mission, is that in my house, usually my father, my mother, it was a custom, a habit in our family. We always had a positive vision of the church. I didn't hear my parents complaining, talking negative things about the leaders, about the church, about the local leaders, local pastors. We grew up loving the church, and I think that it impacted my commitment to mission, because if you believe in something, you give your life for what you believe. If you don't believe, you are there just for a job, for a position, for money, for salary, for something, you don't dedicate your life for that. I think this kind of positive vision creates some kind of commitment in my life, and I can see it reflected in my personal commitment to the mission.
Now, as you were growing up, were you able to attend Adventist education, or
Yes.
through the whole school years?
Let me share something with you from my childhood
Yeah.
that was very important. My father was a local secretary in a local conference, and later he became the president there. And Alyssa, something very interesting. When I was a child, I remember that every day I went to the school in the morning. I came back to lunch at home, because in Brazil we have school just in the morning or afternoon. I came back home, I took my shower, changed my clothes, and I went with my father to the office, and I spent all my childhood in the office supporting people there. The administrative assistants, preparing books for the colporteurs, the LEs, doing everything that they needed there. They always know that I was there. Sometimes the assistants call, where he is in the building. We need him to try to help us to put some correspondence on the envelopes. I was there to help them. It was very positive to me, because it helped me to see how the church operates, how everything works. And at that time, my father, the last part of that time, my father was the president. And I was always curious to understand what the president do in a local conference. And I remember sometimes I was in his office once under his desk, and he didn't see me, just to hear a meeting that they had among the three officers there. I was under the desk hearing everything, to pay attention, to try to understand. Another, I was inside of something that she had there to put his blazer and his jackets there. I was there. I closed the door and I stayed there for a long time, just hearing, not watching because I was not able to see anything, just hearing what they discussed, how they took their decisions and everything. I believe that it was an opportunity for me. I remember that I created like an association for pastors' kids in the building. And I started to invite some of those kids to come to the office during the week to be with me. We prepared desks with paper boxes, something, and we had 2 or 3 offices there. We discussed our items, our agendas, and we organized some projects for the church, everything in a basement of a house that we had close to the office. All these things, I couldn't imagine at that time.
You played
that all
administrator.
those things were opportunities for me. And you know, the administrative assistant to my father as the conference secretary and later as conference president, the same administrative assistant that he worked with him, about 20 years later, she was my administrative assistant when I was the executive secretary of the same local conference. I worked at that conference twice as youth director, and I left the conference to another place in the country, and they called me back to be the executive secretary. And when I worked there, she was the same executive administrative assistant. And I can imagine now her feelings when she saw that guy coming, because I was a child helping her to do many things, and now I came to work with her, to learn from her, because she was a very experienced person. I believe that God gave me a huge privilege to spend part of my life living among all those church workers and learning from them. Well, I forgot your question.
You know, I don't even remember, but it doesn't even matter because that was a brilliant story. So please interrupt my questions all the time with more stories like that. I feel like there's so many.
If I study in Adventist schools, I remember that. I remember it now.
We'll come back to that question.
Okay, no problem.
But there's so many threads I want to pull there. And I hate that we only have an hour because I'm trying to figure out which threads to pull. I absolutely love that they just brought you in and helped, because what they were doing, whether unconsciously or not, was mentoring you. Yeah. They were mentoring you. And whether it seemed like busy work that they could kind of just offload, which is kind of great, they were helping you at a very young age realize that you had a role that you could play. They were showing you that this was an option for you in your life. And I started off by talking about the fact that we have summer workers that come and work in this building, and we try to offer that same opportunity to many of our young people. My youngest daughter actually helped me prepare for the Big Gain conference this year. She got to sit in our meetings. She actually took notes. And at some point in the meeting, I remember one of my bosses looking over and goes, "Did you get that?" They looked at my daughter, who was 14 years old. And I watched at the end of that week, my daughter had more confidence than I have ever seen her have. Like she had adults who respected her and had empowered her. And I think that we don't do that enough with our young people.
Yeah. It was very important for me.
And I wonder in kind of like in the back of my mind, would you be where you are today if you had not been given those opportunities? If you had been playing football or soccer, as we call it, if not saying that you wouldn't, but the idea that they opened their doors and their hearts and gave you these opportunities. We need to be doing more of this, even at just the local church level. Yeah. Women's ministries leaders should be, helping young women to be able to help play a part in this. Yeah. If you're the stewardship person or if you're the AV, how do we involve our young people more? And empower them?
I recognize, Alyssa, that I had this opportunity because my father was the president or the secretary, and I was there because he was there. But as a denomination, as an organization, we need to think in ways to have intern people serving us. People from the church, we don't have space for many, but maybe 2, 3, or 4 during the summertime, they can come, they can help us, we can spend some money on that, but we are not just paying people to help us on something, we are preparing them to serve the church. I had this opportunity. I worked in South American Division for almost 20 years, 19 years as youth director and president, and I tried to do the same with my son. He grew up in the building. He knew every place in the building. He traveled with me for many different trips, sometimes just with me. He came, I remember one of our trips to Amazon. We stayed there for a week. We traveled by small plane. We traveled by boat. We traveled by car on the Transamazonica. That's a huge highway in the middle of the jungle there. He was there with me, and now he's a pastor because he had that opportunity to be close to the church, to see things, to be inspired, to learn. And I believe that all these opportunities shaped us to serve the Lord. If I didn't have those opportunities, I don't know God's plans. But if I didn't have those opportunities, I think that I will not be prepared to do many things that I did. I remember, Alisa, I'm responding what you didn't ask me, but let us talk on that. I remember my second pastoral district in São Paulo. After I started in the first one, I graduated in theology, and I was called to be a local pastor, a single guy as a local pastor. It was a challenge for the local church. We need a pastor with wife to advise us, to visit us, but they sent me to that pastoral district. I stayed there for 2 years. And after 2 years, they moved me to another pastoral district, and I was single because I had almost 5 years dating my wife before we were able to be married, to be married,
To get married.
to get married, yes. And they sent me to the second pastoral district, and that was a huge church with almost 2,000 members. And they sent a pastor with 2 years of ministry, single guy, not ordained. And when they informed the church that that's the pastor that the local conference was sending there, it was a revolution for the church. They prepared a list with almost 500 signatures to the local conference saying, please don't send this person to here. How can we send a guy with 2 years of ministry in a church that had a lot of famous pastors, a huge church, one of the biggest churches in São Paulo, and now you are sending this guy? It's a lack of respect with the church. And they sent me, and I was thinking that I lived a wonderful time in that local district. But if I didn't have this experience living in the local conference, living with my father, I was not able to lead a church like that one with just 2 years of ministry. 2 years of ministry didn't prepare you to lead a church with 2,000 members. But when I think in all the opportunities that God gave me before that time, I understand why He gave me too many opportunities as a young person and gave me the skills to manage all those opportunities because of that beginning.
You know, I think this is a word to young people, to young adults, to take advantage of every opportunity you're given. Because we don't know where it's going to come in handy later in life. Opportunities I had at 20, 25 years old, I'm finding here now at 43-year old, those are the exact talents and gifts that I need for this job. But back then I had no idea why I was doing it. Yeah. But because you pour yourself into whatever opportunities you're given, when the time comes for them to be used in other ways, you're ready.
If you ask to my children, I gave just one advice for both when they went to the boarding school. Just one advice. For my son first, and now to my daughter, because she's studying a boarding school. Don't lose opportunities. That was my only advice. And for my son, I remember when he called us from the boarding school, I said, are you taking advantage of all the opportunities that you have? If they invite you to sing, go. If they invite you to help to prepare some program, go. If they invite you to applaud people, be there. Don't lose opportunities, because these opportunities now will prepare you for something that you don't know. If you lose it now, maybe you'll not be prepared for something that God is opening for you, but take advantage of all the opportunities. It was important for me. I did many things during my childhood, my young time, that I was very afraid, sometimes upset. I didn't like. But now I understand that all those things were a school for my life.
I have to ask, when was the first time you preached a sermon?
Ooh, it was another tragedy.
All right, I'm here for this story.
You know, Uh, I was invited to preach my first sermon when I was a pathfinder.
Me too.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I was
But
12.
but I was 12 also. But it was in a very complicated situation. The union where my local conference and my club was part had a camporee. I think that was the second camporee of that union. It was in 1982, if I'm not wrong. And they invited me to preach at that camporee on Friday evening. In that camporee, at that time, 2,200 participants. It was a huge crowd. For today, it's not a large number of people, but for that time it was. And they invited me to preach at that time. I didn't preach before. I talked with my father and asked him, could you prepare a sermon for me? And he prepared. I remember I have it with me. I have my personal archives where I put all things that I think that are part of my personal history. Those piece of papers, that message is there. My father prepared. I think it was 9 half pages. And I remember that I almost memorized all that sermon to be able to preach to the people, looking at them and being confident to share the message. But when the day was coming, I started to be nervous. How I can preach there? I didn't do it before. I was a very shy child. I was shy to talk with someone. I was always together with my father and mother. If they sent me to be alone with someone, I was very shy. And I was thinking how this kind of shy person will be preaching for those people. And I remember I was thinking I will be behind of a pulpit. I will hold the pulpit with my hands to avoid to show them that I
You're
was
not
trembling.
shaking.
Yeah. And I will talk to the mic. Probably the mic will be in a pedestal or something, and it will be nice. When I arrived there, no pulpit, just a mic and nothing more. And I start to think what I will do with my hands. But when in one hand I can keep the notes, but in the other one I put on my pocket. But when I started to print, I started to tremble, and I decided I can't see the paper because I'm trembling a lot. I put the papers or the notes behind me. When I put the notes behind me to avoid people to see my situation, I forgot the sermon. I need to have it again. But when I start to have it in my hands, to hold it in my hands, it was a tragedy. You know, I had 9 half piece of paper, and I preached the entire sermon in no more than 3.5 minutes. It was, I don't know, but
It was
I
a
preached
rapid
it
fire.
very rapid. At the end, everybody saying, thank you very much. But I was very upset. You are lying. It was a tragedy. I didn't the wrong thing. And I remember I promised to myself, I will not preach again. It was a very negative experience.
You thought you would never preach again.
I promised to myself, please, I'm not available to face this kind of situations again. I'm shy. I'm a shy person. And it's a challenge for a shy person to live a normal life. But when you are exposed to people and you do something wrong, it's much worse. But some months later, the Pathfinder Club, they had the Pathfinder's Day in the local church. And can you imagine who they invited to preach on Sabbath morning? Me. And I said, no, please forget me. I'm not available to preach anymore. But I remember Pathfinder's directors, a lady, she insisted. And I decided to accept it. And it was another tragedy. I remember on Sabbath morning, I preached all the sermon looking at my school director. He was seated there. I didn't see any other person in the church, about 300 people. I didn't see any other person, just my school director. That guy looked down and looked up, looked down and looked up, and I was just looking at him all the time. In my preparation, I was thinking, well, 3.5 minutes for Sabbath morning, it will be too short. I need to put something. Now I will manage this sermon by myself. And I remember that I added one entire chapter of the Bible there to read with people. Because I mentioned David's history, David's story, and I invited people to open their Bibles and read with me the entire chapter about that piece of David's life. At the end, my sermon was 5, almost 6 minutes on Sabbath morning. For me, a tragedy. For the members, it was a blessing. A short message, They was
They invited you every
they
week.
was ready to go back home, and probably they was planning to invite me other Sabbaths to preach there. But when I went to the door to shaking hands of people, that was the habit of that church. I remember that I was too shy, that I was not able to be in touch with people in a correct way. I remember a discipline director of my school, she came to say me something, and she came to give him some kisses because it's normal in Brazil. And I remember that I was too nervous that I kissed her mouth at the door of the church because I was not able to go to any. You can imagine all the tragedies, but I believe that God was merciful with me and gave me opportunity to learn that I need to depend on him, because by myself will be tragedy after tragedy. But he helped me. The third one was better than
It kept
I
getting a little
can't
bit
tell
better.
the story for you. But
I know your sermons have gotten longer than 3.5
yeah,
minutes now.
yeah. I need to go back to that time.
Actually, funny. My first sermon, I remember after I finished it, my mom, I think it was my mom, somebody in my family, let me know that I spoke way too fast.
Mm.
So after that, I started going up with like an outline, and I would always have in big letters with Sharpie, speak slower. Like, so the most important part of my whole thing was just the word speak slower. And it took me quite a bit of time to be able to find out that I can go a little bit slower. I don't need to rush through it. It's that nervous energy, because I was a very shy person too.
Yeah.
I was much more introverted, and it's pulling you out of your shell, and it's scary. And even with a pulpit that you can hang on to,
How two shy people can start can be talking today here? Just by God's grace.
It is definitely by
just
God's
by God's
grace.
grace.
So I love this. I feel like there's so many little tangents we could keep going down, but that's okay. We're going to go back to Adventist education somewhat here. Did you always know you wanted to be a pastor?
Yes, since the beginning.
So from that first sermon that you preached?
No, before that. I remember when I was a child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, sometimes people asking me what you are planning to be when you are a young person. Always. Sometimes I mentioned that you'll be a doctor, but it was for a short time. Today I can't go to a hospital. Yeah, I'm working on that. But always I responded, I would like to be a pastor. I remember in a house that we lived in Brazil, we didn't have a place to park our car. And my father paid for a garage almost a block far from our home. And many times he parked the car there and he came walking, and I was running to meet him to get his briefcase and to put his blazer, his jacket. And I came using that. That was the way that I had as a young person, a child, to say, I would like to be like you. And I would like to be like you means I would like to be a pastor. And I always responded, I would like to be a pastor. It came with me since my childhood. I don't remember the time when I took that decision. It came with me.
So where did you go to college? I didn't know this was going to be a hard question.
No. Well, repeat the question, please.
Where did you go to college or university?
Yes, okay. I studied theology. I went to college in Brazil.
Which one?
At that time, that one was called IAE. Today is UNASP, the oldest campus that they have in São Paulo, in the capital. I studied theology there. At that time, the name was IAE, Instituto Adventista de Ensino. And later, the theology program was moved to the new campus that they inaugurated in the countryside of the state. But I studied there. My degree was granted there.
Okay.
And there I met my wife also.
And what is your wife's name?
Adrian.
I love your wife, by the way.
I also.
I'm a big fan of her.
I love also.
That's really good to know. That's probably more important than me loving your wife.
Yes, of course.
So you met her there. But now it sounds like you guys dated for quite a while before you got married.
We started to date at my second year of theology. And she was in her first year studying to be a nurse. And we needed to date all the time of she was studying. I was graduated. And her father said she needs to be graduated before she will take any decision to get married. And I would like to have her at home living with us at least half year, because we know that she got married and she will not back home. It means she needs to be graduated, come back to live with us for some time. And I was very obedient, and I wait and wait and wait and wait. The major blessing is that when I was graduated, I was called to be a pastor just around the institution. And I had the opportunity to visit her every day in the boarding school where she was a student, because my pastoral district was beside the institution. It means I was there. The second pastoral district, it was in front of the institution, the university. And during all that time, I was single, but she was with me every Sabbath in the local church. People, they understood that I will not married, but I had someone with me that was friend of them, could help them, was very involved in my ministry also.
Did she always know she wanted to marry a pastor?
No. She had very different plans. God changed totally her plans for the future when she decided to get married to a pastor.
All right, so I have to ask, how did you know Adrian was the one?
You know, you don't know exactly by one moment, but my day by day living with her give me this confidence. And the two main reasons help me to understand it. First one, she is a person very committed to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see the beginning of any day without seeing her reading her Bible, the Sabbath school lesson, the spirit of prophecy, praying for our children, praying for me. The days that when I have a huge challenge, I know that she's praying at home. And many times she sent me a message saying, I'm praying for you, be brave, God will help you. Because this kind of a spiritual commitment, it was very precious for me, because I don't have a model for pastor's wife. What I expected from someone, that person was committed to the Lord. Because if that person was committed to the Lord, she will be a blessing in my ministry, will be a blessing for everybody. That was the first one. The second aspect is that she is a good partner. And I liked that. Every appointment that I had, she was available to be with me, to be there. If we went to a camp meeting, she was there. A local program, she was there. If I decided to visit someone, she was available to be there. And I saw we'll be able to build a ministry together. And it was very important for me, because I know myself. I'm not a kind of person that build a ministry alone. I need my family with me. My mother worked with my father. It was the model for me. I would like to have someone, a different person than my mother, but someone that can be with me as a partner, dreaming with me, working with me. And I always mention to her, you have your profession and I will support you. You are prepared for that. And she worked in some hospitals. But I would like to have some kind of commitment between us. The ministry will be our priority. It not means that you can't work in any job. No, but the ministry will be our priority. If we need to move to a different place, the ministry will be our priority. If we need to take any kind of complex decision, the ministry will be our priority. And she was ready to do that. At that time, and she's doing it until now.
And that's a big commitment. And that shows a certain love for the church and its mission. I mean, you would think it should be an easy commitment. You know, for Christians, this should actually be a very easy commitment. But it's not always easy, because uprooting your family or doing this and that, especially I think for mothers, sometimes we recognize what this can do to our families. And, you know, we're very cognizant of these things. And at some point we have to put our faith and our trust that if God has called us, that he will fulfill and he will take care of all the things. It doesn't mean it will be easy. And I'm sure many of your moves have not been easy. And I'm sure she's watched you struggle, and she's watched her children struggle. But the fact that she feels very deeply in her heart that same sense of calling allows her to be a stabilizing force for the whole family.
And you mentioned the right thing, the sense of calling. Ministry was not part of her plans for life. But when we started to date, we started to talk about our future, our ministry, our marriage, she was called. She felt that she was called for ministry. And the same commitment that I have now, she has also, according to her gifts, but she has the same commitment to this ministry. And I think that like I was called, she was called too, and she accepted that call.
And that's a beautiful thing. It's very hard to be living your calling if your spouse doesn't also understand and feel that same call. And I think that seems to be a recurring thing that I hear when I talk with a lot of the people who I'm interviewing, is that we all understand it's a call for a family. One person may be serving in a position,
Yeah.
but the whole family has been called. Yeah. So you finally get married.
Yes.
We have wedding bells. Are you at your big church at this time?
Yes.
Okay.
I was pastor there. I remember they rented a bus, 1 or 2 buses, to go to Rio de Janeiro, where I got married with my wife. And it was nice because at that time, after 1.5 years, I think that I worked alone there, we were a family. The same local church that prepared a list with almost 500 names saying, don't send this pastor. At the end, we had a marvelous time there, an outstanding time working there. I remember probably, and I think in my ministry in general, that was the best time in my life and in my ministry, exactly in that place. And when I had my wedding ceremony, they went there, a lot of them. After 2 weeks, when we came back from the honeymoon, they prepared reception for us. They did a lot of things. It was amazing because the local church, they were part of our family. They were part of all those plans that we had. And they expected that marriage because I went there alone, single, and they expected at some time their pastor will be married. And finally it happened, and they gave us all the support.
So you start off your married life in this big church that supports you,
Yes.
which is a beautiful thing there. Where do you go after that church?
I was called to be youth director in that local conference where my father was evangelist director, secretary, and president. I started my ministry in São Paulo. That is at the center of the country. And after a little bit less than 5 years, just after my ordination, they called me to be youth director there. And I stayed there for 4 years.
Was youth always your passion? Like some people, you just know they're youth pastors. You know, if you see them in seminary, you know they're going to be youth pastors. And there's some people who they're the theologians. And then you have people who they're more of like the administrative type. You can see everyone has their gifts when it comes to pastoral ministry. Was youth your passion?
Youth was my passion, but I didn't see me as someone gifted to work with young people. I didn't expect this kind of work for my life because I was always someone very committed to the work, but very serious. I was not that one to smile with people, to do funny things. I was always serious, focused on my work, dedicating my life to that. And I saw youth directors as very informal people. Their sermons, they preached with a lot of dynamism, telling stories, people crying. And I didn't see myself doing that. Sabbath evenings, they had a lot of recreation for people, different. I didn't like to do that. When they called me, I said, are you sure that you are calling me to do it? Yes. Well, if I have in my life the principle to get all the opportunities and take advantage of that, let me go. If God decides to change my life to any other way, I will accept it, but let me try. And later, I became youth director there, after that in a union, and after that in a division. I could imagine that will happen.
What do you think were the greatest challenges that you saw at that conference and union level that you tried to address when you were the youth director?
Well, during my time as youth director, I tried first to be close to the young people. I liked to be among them, to talk with them, to respond their questions. Second, I used the major part of my time to visit local churches. And I remember My wife did it with me many times. We visit a church in the morning, and in the afternoon, no special program, just a meeting with young people the entire afternoon. In the morning, I shared with them like a research to understand what were the topics that they would like to hear in the afternoon, and I had a lot of them prepared. And during the lunchtime, I checked to see the most important areas or topics that they would like to hear. And in the afternoon, we had like a circle, depending on the church, and I talked with them. I opened for questions, always thinking I need to share values with them. I need to guide them to the Bible. I need to help them to understand that they can be normal people in this world, but at the same time committed to the Lord. The spiritual life is something nice, good. I used my influence to do that. And the third one, I invested on mission with young people. I remember many programs and projects that I had, always creating different ways to involve them with the mission of the church. Because in my mind, if the mission is the priority of the church, this is the priority of any department of the church. Because we don't have the church and the departments. The departments are part of the church. If the mission is the priority of the church, this is the priority of every department. And as youth director, I was thinking, well, if this is the priority of the church, I need to find ways to involve young people. I think that these three areas were very important for me during the time that I was working a local conference and in a union level.
So I want to talk about the second and third one. The second one, I love what you did there, because what you did was you did not decide what they needed to hear. You actually listened to them and addressed needs and allowed them to talk with you.
Mm-hmm.
I think so often we have an agenda. We set this agenda, and this is what everyone needs to hear. But there's a lot of things that, as we grow a little older, that we don't necessarily know that younger people are wrestling with. They're wrestling with different things than what we wrestled with. Some things are the same. Some things have a different face to them. But we have to understand all of these things so we can help them fall in love with their Savior.
Yeah.
And fall in love with his church. And what if you could give like some advice to pastors, youth leaders, whatever, how can they best help young people? From what you were just saying, how do they help kind of get themselves prepared? What were you doing to kind of prepare for these moments? Because you don't know what questions they're going to ask you.
Mm-hmm. Well, if I advise a local pastor, a young pastor, a youth pastor, first, spend time with the young people. In my time, I was able to spend time with them in groups. I believe that today they need more personal time, more than in a group. You can meet with them in a small group, in a special congress, but they need to feel that they are special. Spend time with them. Demonstrate or show interest on them. How are your graduation? Are you ready to graduate next year? How was your dating? When the local pastor asks questions for the young people that demonstrate that the local pastor knows them and is interested in what's happening with them, it is very relevant. And the third one, try to give them something meaningful to do. Because in some local churches, we are involving young people, but we're involving them in some non-meaningful activities. Yes. And they say, you are just trying to give us something to do. And they are very idealistic. They would like to do things to change the world. And we are giving them just small tasks.
Hand out the bulletin.
Yes, hand the bulletin. Shake hands of people at the door. You can recollect the offerings. Or it's important. Everybody that are doing that, it's important. But I think that they need to be challenged. And the local pastors, they can find ways to invite some of them to preach in the local church. Maybe to be the one that will pray for the members there. Something that everybody will stop to see them doing that. It means what you do is very relevant to the church. Spend time with each of them. Each of them. Demonstrate interest on their lives. And third one, give them relevant responsibilities or assignments in the church. I think that it can help them. But you know, Alyssa, behind of all these things, because we are talking about the human aspect, the most important is to help them to love the Lord. Because we can give them opportunity, we can give them leadership, we can give everything to them. If they don't have Jesus, they will lose everything.
So the second thing, I'm going to ask you to define a word for me, because we've used it quite a few times.
Mm.
What is the mission of the Adventist Church?
You know, mission, mission and discipleship are two words that everybody uses,
We
but
use them all the time.
all the times. It means everything and nothing at the same time. Because when some kind of words start to mean a lot of things, it means we don't have any relevance for that word. I like to use one definition for the mission of the church that comes from Ellen White writings. Probably 20 something times she uses this kind of expression. For me, mission is to prepare people to the second coming of Jesus.
Period.
Period. It means prepare people to the second coming of Jesus. It means to take care of people that we have in our church and through them reach people that are not part of this movement that's preparing people to the second coming of Jesus. Sometimes people think, no, the mission is to share books. The mission is to go to internet. The mission, we have a lot of simple definitions. I have a more comprehensive definition. Mission is to prepare people to the second coming of Jesus. Taking care of our members is part of our mission. Because if they are not faithful to the Lord, they will not be able to reach others, or if others come to the church, they will not feel welcome in our church and they will live there. It means taking care of our members as local pastors, local leaders, local members. It's part of our mission, and through them we can reach the world, but always preparing people to the second coming of Jesus. Inside of this definition are the three angels' messages, are the message of the second coming of Jesus, are the mandate to make disciples, to baptize people, to share books, to give Bible studies, everything to prepare people to the second coming of Jesus. And maybe you can say, but in the rest of the Bible speak a lot about a lot of other issues or topics or subjects. But I believe that the Seventh-day Adventist Church was raised for this specific mission. Everybody can help to connect people to the Lord. Many different denominations, but God called one group of people, one movement, for one specific mission, to share the three angels' message and to prepare people to the second coming of Jesus. This is our mission. This is the Seventh-day Adventist mission. Prepare people for the second coming of Jesus using the entire Bible, but this is our main goal.
I love that. You know, the whole Bible, really all it is showing God's desire to dwell with his people. In the very beginning, he created us and he dwelt with us. And at the end, he's going to dwell with us again. That's what
Yes.
Revelation promises.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole Bible points to his desire to dwell with his people. And that's what we've been called to do. It's to remind people that he wants to dwell with us. He's
Yes.
coming back so that he can dwell with us for eternity.
Mm-hmm.
Every story points to the second coming
We will dwell with him and he will come to dwell with
with
us.
us. It's
Yeah.
a beautiful promise. And why would I not want somebody to be able to dwell with him for eternity?
And you know what I like? When I read the Bible in John chapter 14, from verses 1 to 3, that's a portion of the Bible that's very familiar to all Seventh-day Adventist people. Jesus say, in my house, I have many places. I'm not sure that in English is exactly using this word, but in my house, I have many places. It means God is preparing house for many people. I understand that it represents all the history and many things, but he is preparing place for many people. It means let us prepare a lot of people for the second coming of Jesus, because the heaven is a place for many. The heaven is too big, like God's heart is too big. He's preparing a place for many people. And sometimes, Alyssa, before you prepare the next questions, sometimes I think our task as a church is to avoid to close the door of heaven for some. Because sometimes the radicalism of some people are closing the door of heaven. Our challenge is to avoid to, how can I say it in English?
I'd say you could say it in Portuguese.
To lose the way for heaven.
Yeah.
Sometimes the liberalism are teaching people how to lose their way to heaven. They think that they are going, but they are going in a different direction. Our challenge is to avoid to close the door or to open the way for people to lose their way to heaven. Our challenge is to open the door of heaven, to teach people, but put in their hearts the wish, the motivation to be with the Lord, living with Him, and He will dwell with us.
You know, it's such an interesting thing because you're right. There's so many who are closing the door. It's like, nope, it's actually just very narrow. It's just for these very, you know, as long as you're a vegan who does this, and you know, we've narrowed the doors. We've actually decided we're the judges, not God. Yeah. But then sometimes we fling them open so wide that it almost loses its beauty, and it loses the reverence. It loses the meaning.
All the extremes are dangerous. All the extremes. We are called to be at the center. Many times the Bible say, not to left, not to right, but in a balanced way, Usually liberal people, they think that they are very faithful to the Lord. Radical people, they think they are very faithful to the Lord, but they are not. Balanced people, faithful to the word of God, but with love, with kindness, being patient and helping people to go to heaven, not trying to push people out of heaven.
So you worked conference, you worked a union. You're still relatively young at this point, and you end up at the division as the youth director for all of South America. Quick question. Do you speak Espanol?
When I arrived at the division, I needed to learn alone, and I learned.
Okay. So, I mean, Portuguese and Spanish, they're semi-similar, but Brazil speaks Portuguese, but the rest of the countries in your territory,
7 other countries,
all speak Spanish.
Yeah. Podemos hablar en español, Alisa, si lo necesitas. No hay problema.
Sí.
No.
And there's I can see, ¿dónde está el baño?
Yeah,
I learned that one from a mission trip.
Estás aprendiendo bien.
Language learning, I actually can pick up languages very quickly. When I was down in South America recently, by the end of the time, I was being able to pick up words. I can't always speak it back. I think if I was there for like 6 months, I could probably do it. But I've never been able to just put myself in a place where I could just learn a language. So someday, maybe I will. But right now, this is where God has me, and I just get the privilege of randomly talking to people about their
You
languages.
are very comfortable. I'm suffering a lot, but we are okay. We are okay.
You're doing wonderful.
Thank you very much.
So you come to the division. All of a sudden, it becomes very different. You're not in a country that you're very familiar with. Now, the offices are in Brasilia, so you're still in Brazil. But now you're all of a sudden having to understand a Peruvian culture or a Chilean culture, or, you know, all these other countries. It's different. It's not Brazil anymore. What are the greatest challenges that you found that you had to work through as you came to a division level rather than just the union?
Well, you like to hear stories. Let me start with a story. I was youth director, as we talked about, in a local conference in a union. After I was youth director in a union, I was called back to the local conference to be the executive secretary. When I went back to the local conference, the same one that I was youth director, someone told me, you know, your times in youth ministries was gone. Now your life will be in secretariat. You need to put your heart there. And I decided to give all my materials related to youth ministries. For regional directors and local church directors, I gave everything. And I stayed in that position as conference secretary for just 6 months. It was the shorter time in a place in my life. I came back to the local conference after 4 years in youth ministries in that union, 6 months, and they called me back for youth ministries at the division level. And I start to think, what I will do now? I gave all the materials that I had to help people, and now I don't have anything to do my work. And I start to call people, please, I need you to return it to me because I'm coming back to youth ministries and I need to use it. My uniform, my Pathfinder's uniform, I gave for someone because it will be part of our...
I'm going to interrupt you real quick. I have a question. Were you in Pathfinders as a kid?
Yes, I was.
Are you a master guide?
Yes.
Good job. Just making sure.
Thank
I'm a
you
master
very
guide.
much.
I had to make sure I was talking to a fellow master guide at
I
this
was
point.
a Pathfinder during all my childhood.
Me too.
Yes.
It was probably my favorite part of my childhood was Pathfinders.
Because I have a lot of pictures from that time.
Me too. I actually, when I was 13, I asked for the Pathfinder honor book for my birthday gift.
No, but it's a little bit radical. It's not for me.
I spent
I,
all summer with
I
my cousin
I
working on
requested other
honors.
gifts. But when I went back to the division, I need to restart my work in
Everything.
youth ministries, everything. It was nice because my first international trip there was to Ecuador. I didn't speak Spanish. I asked to my administrative assistant to prepare everything in a PowerPoint presentation in Spanish. I trained, I tried to memorize some words to preach there. And I can't forget it. I arrived in Ecuador for a camp meeting there with two other division department directors. I had two presentations. I did the first one on Friday morning. And after the presentation, a local pastor came to talk with me. Pastor, I'm a pastor in a church close to the boarding school where the camp meeting was. Could you preach in my church tomorrow morning, on Sabbath morning? My friend, I don't speak Spanish. I just came here with two presentations. It's all that I have. No, pastor, but if they don't understand, you, don't be concerned. The best for them is to see someone from the division in the church. Well, I will not lose this opportunity. I went back to the hotel during Friday evening. At that time, we didn't have Google Translate or DeepL or AI or any other thing. And I was thinking, how can I prepare a message in Spanish now? I started to think in a message that I had in Portuguese. I took a Spanish Bible and a Portuguese Bible. And with a Bible concordance, I look for words in the Portuguese Bible, and I went to the Spanish Bible to find the same word in Spanish, and I started to write my message until 2:30 a.m. preparing. I have this piece of paper also. That was my first message in Spanish, learning how to learn
Someday
the
I want to
culture.
see all these pieces of paper.
Yeah.
I actually wish now I had gotten that.
I have some boxes with a lot of different things that were part of my life, and I decided to preserve it because sometimes when I moved to the United States, I had a time to see all these things. It's like a trip in the time, going back to the past. But it was a privilege for me to learn Peruvian culture. And South America is like Europe and many other places. You have one name to define a group of countries, and everybody thinks they are the same. They are not the same. If you talk about Brazil, it's one reality. And in Brazil, you have many different countries inside one country, many different cultures. If you go to Argentina, it's totally different. To Chile, Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, Paraguay, Uruguay, they are totally different. It was a learning process for me to understand all these different cultures, but I was very happy in that positions that I had at the division and visiting those countries and living with them. It was an amazing time.
So, I'm just going to kind of point something out. At the beginning of this, I told you approximately how long we normally go, and you were worried about us not having enough to fill. And I told you that sometimes I have to fill, in a very short span, lots of years. And I'm fearing we're going to end up in this situation. It's much easier to talk than you think, isn't it? Those stories, they just start coming out. Yeah. So we're going to have to start kind of fast forwarding a little bit through our history. Okay. We're going to put it on a 2x speed here. So you served as the youth director for how long at the division?
4 years.
4 years. And then you were called, I believe.
I arrived at the division when I was 34. It was something totally unusual. Really a young person to be a youth director. I remember the first meeting that I participated, all very experienced leaders, and a young guy entering the room. I was totally uncomfortable with that situation. But I was glad to see that the church was investing in young people for some relevant positions at that time. The same happened when I became president.
Which was 4 years later.
4 years later, 38.
So you were 38 years old.
Yeah.
And you were a division president.
Yeah.
This is kind of I'm just going to say, it's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. And I wasn't president in any other level of the church before. I was not a local conference president or a union president. When they elected me, it was a very risky election for the church. But I understand now that God was behind everything.
While you were there, as you know, in September of 2023, just in case, people are watching this in 2024, they know what September we're talking about. I had the privilege to visit Brazil for the first time. And it was a life-transforming trip for me. I actually don't talk about it too often. I'm still 3 months later trying to process. I spent 2 weeks talking to my therapist about my trip to Brazil because there was just so much that I appreciated and loved about the country, about the church. And one of the things that I would say that you're kind of known for is innovation and a focus on media, digital ministries. Your background is not in media ministries, though. And you weren't like some like innovator, like kind of what made this become a core of what the legacy is that you've left? Why did you invest in this? What made you see that this mattered?
You know, Alice, you don't need to be an expert to do something. I was not an expert in communication or in technology, but as a leader, you need to identify opportunities and invite the right people to do the right work. At that time, I didn't do it alone. I had a lot of colleagues working with me, an executive committee to evaluate all the decisions. But as the leader, I saw that the world was growing in the communication, in television, in radio. Radio came first before my presidency. The television started before my presidency, but we invested a lot. But especially in social media and on internet, we decided to paying attention on the movement of the world and the opportunities that we had, we decided to invest on that. Because I believe that we need to think in mission first in a comprehensive way. Mission is not only one method that we need to use all the time. Mission is something very comprehensive. We can find many different methods to prepare people to the second coming of Jesus. And the second word that's precious for me is integration. Comprehensive, everybody together, and the third one, something that can be simple, bold, and relevant. I repeated it thousands of times in South America. Every project that we do need to be simple, no more than 10 minutes. Everybody can understand what you think and they can come with you. Bold, because they can see, it deserves my attention. And relevant, because the church would like to do something that will change the world, that will really prepare people for heaven, and not only invite them to do things that we are doing for 100 years, and they can see that it's not reaching people, and they are totally dismotivated to participate on that, something relevant. Those definitions for me were very important, and communication was part of that kind of definition. We didn't invest only in communication when we think in technology, TV or radio. We invested in publishing also. Mm-hmm. During that time, we shared more than 300 million books during 10 years, giving to the community books with our message. It was something relevant. We tried to invest on education, the health area, technology, publishing, and many other areas, always helping them to increase, to be efficient, to work with excellence, but focus on mission based on all those aspects that I mentioned to you.
Simple,
bold and relevant. These kind of projects can reach people's hearts, can reach church members' hearts, and can reach people's hearts in the community.
You know, something I love that you keep saying, we keep tangenting. It's okay. At this point, there's just a ball of threads and it's all over the place. You keep putting an emphasis on members. And, you know, a lot of times when we talk about mission, we don't think about Adventists. But what good is it to go to heaven and to have seen that our attrition was so bad that all these people who are sitting by our sides are not there as well? Something I've appreciated, let's call it in your tenure here at Secretariat, is that you've emphasized discipleship. Mm-hmm. Mission starts in the church. It's not necessarily just outside of the church. Yeah. Because if we ourselves believe something so firmly, missional activity coming out of us just becomes natural. In our zeal to bring people in, sometimes we forget the very people who are sitting in the pews. And I love that every time you talk about mission, the first people you talk about are those people in our pews, because those are our young people. Yeah. Who you have obviously spent a huge part of your time. I love the fact that you're talking about being simple, bold, relevant. There's no point.
You
of me-
memorize it.
I do.
You see?
I already did.
Something simple.
I'm great.
If I have 20 minutes of definition here, you'll not be able to memorize. But 3 words, it's easy, it's simple, and it's in your mind.
I actually memorized exactly where this is in here because I'm going to re-listen to how you like worded that, because I actually I'm in the middle of working on a project right now in my job in communication, and I want those 3 driving principles to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Because it makes sense. We complicate things, or we just kind of try to redo things that we've already done that are failing, as you said, or aren't working currently.
You know, Alyssa, people today are exhausted by social media, by the responsibilities of their life. If, as a church, we would like to invite them to be part of something complex, they are not available to do that. They don't have interest. No. But when you show them something very simple, but it will impact the community, and they will change the history, they will change the situation, participated on that.
I want to be a part. I'm sold. What is it?
Everybody would like to be part of a winner game. And this is a kind of winner game. But you were talking about discipleship. 2 things that I would like to mention to you. First, we are using the expression at GC, disciple making, more than discipleship.
That is true. But you said discipleship earlier.
Yes.
So I was just quoting
Sometimes it comes naturally. But we are using this expression. Discipleship is a definition. It's right. It's not wrong. But disciple making helps people to understand that discipleship is something dynamic. Disciple making is disciple making disciples. Discipleship is a concept, an idea. And what we are looking for is for people that are able to be part of disciple making process. We are working with other people. And the second concept, I believe more in multiplication than in the growth of the church. The growth, I can have an evangelist campaign, I can add new people, and it's good, it's right, it's not wrong, but we can add people. Multiplication is every member multiplicating themselves or themselves. Yeah, it's right. Every member multiplicating in a new member. It's a personal involvement. This is multiplication. And I believe in disciple making and multiplication regarding to what you mentioned to the local members.
You know, I ponder this. If each member, we have roughly 22 million, just spent a year. If churches invested money in helping their members to have a relationship with Christ and to bring one of their friends in, we'd have 44 million.
Yeah.
In 2 years, we'd have 88 million. And now I'm going to stop because my math skills are not going to be able to work when we get to the 16 plus 16. I've already lost my math. That's why I'm not in accounting. I'm in communication.
You know, I was in Bulgaria some weeks ago. And it called my attention. We have 7,000 members in Bulgaria. We don't have a strong presence, but I have a calculation with them. You know, if you start to multiplicate your members, let us imagine if every Seventh-day Adventist person prepare another person to be baptized in 1 year, it means we double our membership every year. Do you know how many times we need to reach all the population in Bulgaria? 9 years.
Oh,
9
wow.
years. I'm talking about Bulgaria, where we don't have a lot of Seventh-day Adventist members. In 9.5 years, we can baptize, just thinking in numbers, we can baptize the entire country. It means if we think in multiplication, our mission can move faster, much faster than we are moving now.
And the mission is not necessarily baptism, although that's hopefully what happens here. It's telling your neighbor that I want to spend eternity with you.
Yeah.
It's preparing a people
witnessing
for the second coming.
Yeah.
So how long did you serve as the president?
Almost 15 years.
So I'm trying to remember when because it was not during a GC session that you were elected. It was during an annual council,
yes,
I believe.
The annual council 2006. After the annual council 2006, I was elected in South American division, and later my name was approved by the general conference. It was in probably November 2006, and I started officially my leadership on January 1st, 2007.
And when you came to the GC, it was also not at a GC session, as is normal, because normally these kind of positions are voted during a GC session.
I replaced both leaders that retired. The former division president retired, and I was elected to replace him. And Pastor GT retired also. He was the previous GC secretary, and I replaced him.
If you could say in our final minutes here, if you could give a vision of what you would love to see in the church in the next, by the end of the decade, by 2030, besides Jesus coming again, okay? I mean, because that's obvious. We all want Jesus to be here again. What would you say from your heart you would love to see in the next, by the end of the decade, that the church has?
Well, how to summarize a decade in 1 minute?
I'll give you a minute and a half.
I
You're
have
welcome.
an expression that I read some time ago that is something that I really appreciated a lot. And this is something that I have in mind for the church, now and in the future. A church that can be distinct but not distant. A church that can keep the identity, a church that can live faithfully to the Lord, to the Word of God, but at the same time, a church that's present in the community, sharing the gospel, teaching people, invite them to come, serving their needs, like the Christ method that many times we repeat. I envision a church that can be committed to the Word of God and keeping their identity at the same time that's very committed to the mission. I know that we are facing a lot of challenges in our unity. And this is a tendency in the entire world, this polarization time. But if we are focused on our message and our mission, the unity will not be a problem for us. My main concern is that sometimes the unity is a problem because we are not focusing correctly in our message with a balance, in a balanced way, and in our mission with passion, innovation, creativity, commitment. When we work with both together, many other problems will be resolved. The church will be relevant in the community, and we will prepare many people to the second coming of Jesus.
That seems like a simple, bold, and relevant plan.
You learned well. Congratulations. You're a good student.
Thank you. Thank you so
I came
much.
here to be interviewed by you, and now you
And
are
I
the
learned.
student. Okay.
And that's how this kind of works.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming and spending
Thank you
time
for
with
you.
me, Erton.
It was a pleasure for me.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of ANN Profiles with my special guest, Erton Köhler. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, YouTube channel, wherever it is you're tuning in today. I don't want you to miss any future episodes. Thank you for spending this time with me, and join me next week as I continue to get to know the life